it's not just that we're having a grass-fed burger. It's the bun on that burger is regenerative wheat. The flour in that cookie is regenerative flour. It's organic peanut butter. There's no seed oils. It's made with butter or ghee or tallow, everything in the restaurant.
Food is not just meant to be something that tastes good on the tip of your tongue. It is to be something that nourishes your body. So when you have an injury, and we all are going to experience those things as we get older, does your body have the essential building blocks to put your body back together? Food is not just meant to be something that tastes good on the tip of your tongue. It is meant to be something that nourishes your body. So when you have an injury, and we all are going to experience those things as we get older, does your body have the essential building blocks to put your body back together?
Pregnancy was never hard for me. I'm super blessed to be an easy vessel to bring God's creation forth. It's not a hardship for me to be pregnant.
Welcome to the Built for Growth podcast. Today I have on Mollie. She is the executive chef and founder of Sage Regenerative Kitchen in Los Angeles, alongside her husband, Elias. She is a leader in the regenerative agriculture movement with 200 acres at Sovereignty Ranch in the Texas Hill Country. Her mission is to produce healthy food from a healthy soil for her communities. As a self-proclaimed lifelong liberal, Mollie has been confronted with the bureaucracy that destroyed her once thriving restaurants in Los Angeles during the pandemic. Mollie came to the conclusion that the Democratic Party did not center around family, God, or freedom, and now sees herself as a radical centrist. I kind of like that term. I feel like I'm also right down the middle. Some things about me are very liberal and some things about me are conservative. And balance is always important, which is why I really enjoyed this conversation with Mollie, as we covered a variety of topics like her personal journey from vegan to vegetarian. Yeah, she still has yet to try meat. And her thoughts on the conventional meat and farming methods, and why she decided to create a regenerative food supply for her restaurants by opening Sovereignty Ranch, where she lives and works with her husband and 5 children. My takeaway is that Mollie is a genuine person who believes that instead of feeding people lies, she'd rather serve food with integrity. So remember, whatever it is, you were built for it. Well, Mollie, it's awesome to have you here today. I don't know if you know this. I've been following you for about a year, maybe over a year now. Time goes by so quick. And I have been really intrigued by your story. I love supporting small business. So I saw that you had a couple restaurants in California, which I was actually just recently able to visit one in LA, and the food was great. I took a couple friends with me. I had the grass-fed burger. I guess let's start with that. You had these restaurants.
Vegan restaurants and a brewery, and I was selling them in 2019, 2020. It was a big, acquisition from big money, and that was going to be my retirement to be a full-time mom. And I had started doing regenerative agriculture years before that. And I started to realize that the vegan ideology, there was cracks in it for me. I started to see, oh my goodness, there's no vegan food. Literally, I'm growing food with blood meal and bone meal and feather meal. And this is all coming out of the consolidated feedlot system. It's all coming from that death system that I thought I was trying to avoid. So in me becoming a farmer, I realized that what you can believe in the city while you're just living in your isolation from nature is not real. There is no vegan food. Vegan food doesn't exist. All food has death in it. But at the point that I was selling my restaurants, it didn't make sense to make the change. And I just said, I'll sell them and then I'll start a new thing and it'll be regenerative. And then the pandemic hit. We never sold the restaurants. We pivoted, tried to survive the pandemic, and I lost 3 stores through the pandemic. And we were going to close our last 2 stores earlier this year. And I thought, you know what? It doesn't have integrity to just close these restaurants being vegan. I'm going to tell the world what I discovered through regenerative agriculture, that when you're connected to nature, there is no veganism. And regeneration is the way that man can take our place as the keystone species and do as we're asked to do and tend to the garden. And so I, on Earth Day, made an announcement this 10, 12, 13 years these different restaurants had been open, hey, we're going to become a regenerative agriculture restaurant. We're going to support local farmers and regenerative farmers only. And that's what's happening. And we're the first fully regenerative restaurant in Los Angeles.
I was going to say it's not easy to find regenerative food anywhere. So I was so excited when I found your restaurant, and also that it is seed oil free. Can I talk about the peanut butter cookie really quick? Because that just popped in my mind. That was the best peanut butter cookie I've ever had in my life. That was incredible. I ate one. I didn't intend to eat the whole thing in one sitting, but I did. And I really contemplated buying another one. And I thought I better not, because I'll eat it on the drive home. And then I'll have 2 cookies while I sit for 4.5 hours and drive back to Vegas.
The flour in that cookie is regenerative flour. It's organic peanut butter. There's no seed oils. It's made with butter or ghee or tallow, everything in the restaurant. We really have shifted from a vegan restaurant to a restaurant that wants to serve you the highest quality whole food available. And that's what we did. And there's no supply chain for this. We had to invent the supply chains. We have to buy a pallet of chicken at a time, because there's no supply chain for regenerative chicken directly from the farmer. Like, I'm creating the supply chain because it does not exist yet.
Is there ever any trouble in that? I mean, do you ever not have what you need in order to fulfill a menu?
Yes, and we have to be out of things. We actually had a training with our staff when we did the switch, and I said, one of the things we're going to have to be okay with is, you know what, no, we don't have bacon today, or we don't have whatever today, because we're only going to have the highest quality, and we're not just going to sub it out for something at Restaurant Depot because we're out. We have to be okay with saying, that's not available because that's not available, and I don't want to serve you something from Costco or Cisco and trick you. I want you to know that I'm out of it because we only serve you the best, and it wasn't possible to get it at this moment.
So let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about your background, because I think one of the most fascinating parts is that you grew up as a vegan and still to this day haven't actually eaten meat. Now, I understand you're a vegetarian now, so you eat eggs and you drink milk and you eat animal-based products. But I actually love the polarity of that. I love the fact that you grew up a certain way and you thought that that was probably the best way, which is, I'm sure, why you started your restaurants and you wanted to promote what you thought was good. And somewhere along the way, you changed your mind. So tell me about growing up vegan and where that switch came into play.
So my mother is a vegetarian to this day. She was not eating any animal products when she had me. I was raised in that kind of consciousness, and I just always kind of went along with it. And I went to college, and then of course there was all those PETA films that kind of backed up the version of life that I had been living in. And through the years, I was just totally fine being a vegetarian. But when I started farming and I felt connected to nature, and I'm looking around and I'm realizing that the entire creation is constantly consuming itself. It's constantly, stuff is dying and being consumed by the next generation. And I also realized that death is not the end, but just a step. And it's everything is being recycled constantly. There's no waste in nature. And I had these very strong ideas of what was right and wrong. And I realized that nature is far more brutal than humanity is ever going to be. And through these observations on my farm and sitting and I'm breastfeeding my child and I'm thinking I'm doing the best for my child and my breast milk is liquid gold and it's so amazing. And then I'm milking my cow and not drinking the milk because she has 2/4 that the calf is drinking and 2/4 the calf is not drinking. And then I'm buying boxed oat milk at Costco for my older toddler, and I'm thinking, you know what, something is wrong here. If my breast milk is liquid gold, the best on the planet, and is feeding and nourishing my child, then my cow Una's breast milk is also liquid gold. will nourish and feed my older children. Like, that's doesn't make any sense. And so through all of these realizations, I said, you know what? I had been indoctrinated to believe something that was not true. And I was indoctrinated, and I had the best intentions. Less harm was my intention. And I also realized that you can't grow vegetables without causing harm. Like, there is no method to grow miles and miles of celery and not displace a bunch of animals. So this idea that just by eating celery I could cause less harm was not true. And through all of these realizations, I shifted. And, I didn't shift what I was eating, but I shifted my beliefs. And I think that wisdom is to believe something fully, but when something else makes more sense, we must be willing to change our mind. And this is not just a right now or veganism. The whole pandemic taught us that we have to be willing to change our mind. We have to look at something and go, oh, wow, that doesn't actually make sense. Like, 6 feet apart doesn't make sense. There's no reason that will somehow keep us safe. And so let's use our critical thinking skills. And so I'm so grateful that I have the ability to change my mind and to say, oh, wait, what I've believed my whole life doesn't resonate with what I believe God has in store for me. So I'm going to shift my mindset. And I'm grateful for that, because I'm watching some of my dear liberal friends, twist themselves into a pretzel right now, trying to oppose RFK. And I'm literally like, no matter who you voted for, if RFK gets in that position, it's a win. And they're like, but he's a quack. And what if people can't have vaccines? Like, no, none of that is true. And so I'm so grateful that I can say, that makes sense. And I'm so excited. I'm so grateful for that. And so that's how I came to that, was just observing on the farm, what's happening around me. And that I realized that veganism is a concept that only can make sense from a city view, from an apartment, from a high rise. It doesn't make sense when you're in the soil and on the land and you realize how everything is connected.
That's so beautiful. There's so much to unpack right there. And I feel like what you talked about, the critical thinking, that is something that's really missing in a lot of people's lives. People attach to an idea or an ideology and they become that, and they don't want to take in new information. So it's really hard to make change when people don't want to consider all sides of something, right? If I believed that there was a way that we could exist that benefited people and the environment and didn't cause pain or death to animals, I would be all for it. I would love to have that. Yeah, most people, I think most good people absolutely would. I tried to be a vegetarian for a little while when I was pregnant with my son, my second pregnancy. And in that pregnancy, I was living in Singapore, and there was no way for me to get ethically raised meat, or ethically, slaughtered meat. And that was important to me. And I just, at that time, didn't have as much information as I do about now about the bioavailability of meat and how good it can be for you. And so I said, you know what? I think that I can just do with less meat or not really much meat at all. And in that pregnancy, and this is anecdotal, but, I started to have cravings like sugar. I definitely wanted to chew ice a lot. And I know that can be indicative of being iron deficient. Craving sugar can be indicative of being low in protein. But in any case, I really started to do my research, and I really started to dig into this, and I really started to take all the things into account, not just the way I would like it to be. I would like us to be able to live in a world where we don't have to hurt anything. It's not how it was meant to be. Unfortunately, it's just not the reality of it. I've even seen some information about plants being able to kind of see us, not in the way that you and I use our eyes, but a plant that is growing can sense that you are there. They can sense your energy. It can see you in a way. And also I've collected information that when you cut a plant, that there is a version of screaming for the plant, that the plant does feel that. And So you go down this rabbit hole and you say, well, look, if plants most likely have feeling, which I believe, I think everything in a way has its sense of being and a sense of feeling, then animals do too, humans do too. So how can we do this the best way possible? It's not just about what I would like. It's about what is realistic and what is best and the best way that we can do it. So then I believe that the best way we could do it is the way that nature intended for it to be done, to animals to be raised with free roaming space, outside in sunlight with nature, with grass, with insects, cohabitating in a very natural way. And then for the process when the end of life is coming, to make that as painless and ethical as possible. Because these animals, I believe, were put here to nourish us. And I don't think there is a better way than that. Unfortunately, it's just the way I think that it needs to be. Because when you talk about even milling down, corn, collecting the corn, collecting wheat, collecting all these garbanzo beans, whatnot, we are hurting the environment and animals, getting chopped up by blades and these things. So
combine harvester.
Right.
The combine harvester obviously chops up things. And I don't tell people, we should never harvest wheat or corn or garbanzos. I'm just saying the idea that there is a death-free diet is wrong. And it's been propagated as a humane diet. And what's true is if everybody went to that diet, it would be detrimental for the planet. If everybody just decided they were just going to eat legumes and grains, it would be completely detrimental to the environment. And the math, they say, oh no, because the acres of grass-fed beef could be turned, but it's not an acre for an acre. I graze beef on steep hills that you could never grow garbanzo beans and corn on. And so that's not true. You can't just switch one for the other. And the difference is when you're doing that combine harvesting, you're also doing harm. Every time you till the soil, we're doing harm to the soil. And cows being moved regularly onto different pastures are actually helping the soil, growing more, having more micro and macro life in that soil and above and around that soil.
Yes, I love that. Let's talk about your pregnancy, since I was on the topic of mine. So you have how many children now?
I have one adopted son and 4 biological children. So I've had 4 pregnancies. My 37 was my first child. So I was geriatric for all 4 of my pregnancies because I didn't start till 37. And I had 2 vegan pregnancies and 2 vegetarian pregnancies. And I can see differences in the kids, in the strength of my 2 younger kids, in the straightness of their teeth. It's interesting. There is definitely differences in the children that were having animal products while I was pregnant and were not having animal products while I was pregnant. Even the formation of their jaw, which the Weston A. Price people talk about a lot. So I do notice all of those things. I don't notice, pregnancy was never hard for me. I'm super blessed to be an easy vessel to bring God's creation forth. It's not a hardship for me to be pregnant. And so it wasn't for me different, but I do notice some health differences in the kids. And my 2 youngest kids are stronger, healthier, straighter teeth, and overall stronger immune systems.
That's really interesting. If you could go back on all the pregnancies, you would do them all vegetarian. Would you consider eating meat during a pregnancy?
Well, I'm not even eating meat now, but I would definitely do bone broth. And my dad was begging me to do bone broth, and I was like, meh, meh. You raised me vegan. I turned out fine. Meh, meh, meh. But I definitely would be doing that if I could go back. Also just raw milk. I wasn't even doing that until my 3rd pregnancy. And so I wished I had done that. And I think on my 2nd pregnancy, I did do a little bit of yogurt, even though I think that, so I mean, even by my 2nd pregnancy, I'd gotten the hit that I needed a little something.
Okay. So What is it like for you being vegetarian and pulling a cow and sending it to slaughter? Because you own a ranch. Tell us a little bit about that too. You own a ranch now in Texas. You've moved.
Yeah, I live in Texas. We have Sovereignty Ranch, and we're growing food for our community that lives here on the ranch and the greater community at large. And we have a hog program. We have about 100 hogs on the ranch. We have a dairy, a small micro dairy right now. We just have raw milk, and we're doing a herd share, and we're working on getting our facility built so we can have Texas permits to sell raw milk. And then we have a small beef herd, as well as a meat goat herd, and also a sheep herd. So yeah, I mean, people have come into the restaurant screaming at me, "You have no idea how sentient a cow is." And I literally do. I have watched, like, my husband pull a cow. At a cow, Fantasmo was his name. He was born on Halloween, and that means ghost in Spanish. And he pulled that cow, took his pajama shirt. My husband's like in his pajamas, takes his pajama shirt off, wipes the cow out and cleans out his nose, and raised that cow, bottle fed that cow, bull calf. And then, in 2 years, we sent him to be harvested. And I loved him. And I was sad when we sent him. And honestly, I didn't sign up, at least that I know of, to be like the advocate of regenerative meat and that in a meat-based diet. That just happened. Like, through my awakening, I became this person who's done like 75 podcasts in the last 6 months talking about the benefits of meat. And who would think that I would be chosen to be that person when I do love animals? I want to rescue animals. I want to save them from a bad life, but I also understand their place and our relationship to cows. And cows are having a huge sacrifice for humans on this plane, on this realm that we live in, where God has placed us. Cows' role is a huge sacrifice for humans. And I think we must have reverence for that. And I think that we must treat them with love and respect while they're here. And we must let their life be the best that it can be for the 2 years that they're with us. And then we have to honor that life. I don't think we should throw away so many parts of the animals that we do. I think we should make bone broth out of all the bones. I think we should have tacos de cabeza. And my family eats, we keep all the heads of all of our cows, and my husband boils the whole head and makes, does a community meal, and we do tacos with it. But most cow heads just get thrown away. Most, the tails, the feet, the this, the that. We have to be better at giving reverence to the whole animal. And we have to be better at giving reverence to the life that we give them while they're here. But it is a dichotomy. I'm sad, and I have love, and I pray over them when they leave. I thank them for what they gave us. Every time we load animals in that trailer, I hop up on the wheel well, and I look in the slot at all of them, and I'm brought to tears. Like, I get the sacrifice that they are for my family, and I don't take it for granted. I never don't get up and go say goodbye. I never don't go look them in the eyes and thank them for what they're contributing. And maybe that makes me, people on the internet say it makes me psychotic or a sociopath or whatever. I think it makes me profoundly connected to what it takes to be alive on this planet right now.
I would think so too. And I think anybody who can step back from their programming and see the value that you bring by being able to love these animals, but still understand their purpose and your role in that purpose. I really admire the fact that you have been such a trendsetter and breaking down barriers, because I know that it is not easy to be the first of your kind. And I really feel like what you're doing with the restaurants, what you're doing with the regenerative farm, you are the first wave, and therefore you're going to take the heaviest hit, I think, in everything, because people don't understand the value of nutrition yet, which if you sit back and think about it, people look at nutrition as protein, fats, and carbs. That is an oversimplification of everything that goes on in your body. There are micronutrients that will build and or maintain your body for the duration of your life. So you've got to look at the things that you put in your body as not how many calories is this, that actually is pretty irrelevant. It's how nutritious is this? Because if this is nutritious and dense in quality nutrients and proteins and fats, then I'll get what I need out of it and I'll be full longer. People who struggle on diets a lot of times, I think, is because their body's screaming at them when they're eating a rice cake wafer and they're not getting the iron, the B vitamins, the methylated B, natural B vitamins. They're not getting magnesium. They're not getting the things that they need, especially in their natural forms, because there are a lot of vitamins out there that exist in synthetic forms that I don't believe are as easy for our bodies to process. As a matter of fact, 40% of people, it's estimated 40% of people do not methylate. That means break down synthetic B vitamins. And when your body doesn't know how to break something down, that means it doesn't know what to do with it. So what are the side effects of that? Well, it's linked to ADHD. It's linked to, that hyperactivity, the lack of focus, and postpartum depression. So point in case is we have to start digging deeper and realizing that food also serves a purpose. Food is not just meant to be something that tastes good on the tip of your tongue. It is meant to be something that nourishes your body. So when you have an injury, and we all are going to experience those things as we get older, does your body have the essential building blocks to put your body back together? Does it have the proteins and the nutrients to build new bone if you break a bone, or cartilage or skin cells or whatever it is? Because those things don't just come out of thin air, right? They need minerals, they need nutrients, they need vitamins, your body needs that, and your brain needs that. So it's not as simple as calories in, calories out. It's that your body really needs to have the sustainability to function, but also thrive. And I just think people are so disconnected from our food, and we throw food away like it's nothing. And we don't think about the food that we're eating. When you deep fry something in, seed oils that have been, just processed to no end and are extremely inflammatory, we don't know that. And I don't want to fault anybody, because I also, even as a professional athlete for so long, didn't know that when I thought I was eating healthy, it turns out that I wasn't really, because I was mostly following the food pyramid, which I think is a giant scandal. Like, I don't believe in it at all now. But there's so there's so much that we don't know. And it makes me sad, because I know that there are a lot of working moms and dads and people out there who are good, well-meaning people who just don't realize that even a sandwich from Subway isn't healthy and it's not good for the environment. It goes so much deeper than that.
There's so much more than so there's the nutrients and there's the phytonutrients and the micronutrients, but then there's also the microbiology that lives in the environment where our food is grown. And all of our food is sterile because we're getting it from millions of miles away, because we're outsourcing everything to the cheapest labor dollar. And when our grandparents had a garden and they went outside and they picked peas or they picked cabbage and they just rinsed it in the sink and chopped it up, all that microbiology from that environment, we're replenishing nourishing that microbiology that is in our gut. Our gut microbiology, a healthy gut is 70% compatible with healthy soil. And so when we separate from local food, we're actually diminishing our gut, and our gut is our second brain, and it is our intuition, it is our immune system. And so when we have an unhealthy gut, we have an unhealthy mind, we have an unhealthy intuition, and we have an unhealthy immune system. And so we look at how all of our food is processed and packaged and dipped in sanitizer and dipped in bleach and wax put on it and all of these things. We're losing the microbiology from the environments of where our food came from, because we want our food sterile so it has a long shelf life. But what if the goal was to get the most fresh food with the shortest shelf life, so that we knew we were replenishing that microbiology in all of us? Because we're only 50% us, the skin bag that houses our soul, and we're 50% that microbiology that keeps that skin bag healthy And if we don't have a connection to the soil, we become sterile ourselves, and we're eating food from sterile environments. So we're getting what's considered an industrial microbiome, which cannot keep us healthy, cannot give us a good intuition, and will have us have mental illness as well as physical illness.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you just said. Can you elaborate on the health of the soil? Because this is something that I feel like isn't talked about enough. And I find it incredibly fascinating. I've learned a little bit about mycelium and the network of communication that we're just scratching the surface on, but beginning to understand that there is a communication path that happens through healthy soil, plants that will share water, trees that will share water with each other. This underground network is something that industrialized farming absolutely disregards and destroys. And I think that it is vital to anybody who's even on this green side of things. If you want our earth to be a healthier place, that's one way to look at this. But also what you were just talking about isn't something that I've really thought about before, about the microbiome of the food and how that affects the microbiome in a positive way. I've thought about it, negatively, of like, oh, well, if we, have all these chemicals on our food and it kills all the nutritional value. But what you're saying is a little bit different. And so I want you to elaborate on that.
So in regenerative agriculture, we have like 5 basic principles, and the main goal of regenerative agriculture is to keep that microbiology in the soil intact. And so we say no-till, and we say cover crops. The mother is modest. We want to keep Mother Earth covered when we're not growing corn or soy or whatever else. We want to grow other cover crops. And then animal integration, which means grazing those cover crops in between harvests of corn or soy or what fava beans or whatever other things you were talking about, using the animals, moving the animals through the system so they leave their saliva, their poop, their pee. All of that adds to the microbiology of the soil, and then come in and grow whatever you're growing. Other thing that is really important is biodiversity, having both annual and perennial crops, eating more perennial crops, having more perennials in the system, and then less chemicals. So those are the 5 tenets of regenerative agriculture. And when you're doing that, focusing on the soil, you're growing healthy soil. So by some estimates, 25% of life on the planet lives in the top 8 inches of topsoil. But we're learning so much. There's some newer estimates that are saying that as much as 59% of life on the planet live in the top 8 inches of topsoil. And when we plow every single year, we're cutting up all those mycelium pathways. We're cutting up all of the mycorrhizal. We're cutting up the viruses, the bacterias, the fungi that are in the soil, and then they have to start over again. And so what happens is every year you're having less microbiology in the soil, because every year you're chopping it all up, and then whatever survives has to try to recreate it, and every year less survives that chopping it up and then being left fallow with no living root for the microbiology to live on. And either way, we're having a mass extinction event. And people talk about the polar bears, the whales, carbon, all these things that people focus on because they can be monetized. You can get people to write checks for a cute polar bear. You can get people to write checks for wind power and solar power and carbon. Can't really get people to write checks for farmers to take better care of the soil. But this mass extinction event is really life as we know it. All of us are dependent on that. And I believe it's deeply connected to our connection to God as well. Because when we're connected to the soil and we have that little bit of creation inside of us and we're constantly eating in that cycle of creation, I think that then we have a better guttural instinct, trust your gut. I think that's actually a little piece of God expressing inside of us through that microbiology, through that creation. And the more disconnected we are from that, the less we're able to trust our gut, the less we're able to trust God. And that's how we have this huge overreaching government that's in between you and me and everybody, because we don't trust each other, we don't trust ourselves, and we don't trust God. But I think it all comes back to, if we could go back to eating locally of local sources where we would be connected to that soil, we're not dipping everything in sanitizer before it gets to us, we could be healthier on so many levels, spiritually, physically, and emotionally and mentally. They do. There's certain, I was organic certified, so I know exactly. It's a less parts per million of sanitizer that you can put in the stuff, but it's still it's sanitized.
When
It's
you say
all about
stuff, like
shelf
you mean a
life.
wash? Like, is it something that's washed over the top, or is it something that's put on the plant in the soil as it's growing?
It's something that's put on the plants that are, no, it's something that you're washing to make it for travel. So you're taking the carrots, let's say, and you're washing them in a sterile bath so that no microbiology is on them so they don't go bad. Like the average carrot you eat could be as much as a year old. And then they put them in coolers with special gas that makes it so they can't decompose. And then they get sent out through the year. Same with apples, grapes. But all produce is sterilized of the microbiology in order for it to not go bad. Like if you got a box from me, from my farm, you have to eat all that produce within the week that I brought it to you, or it's going to go bad, because that's what nature does. Nature breaks down and decomposes. Anything that stays in your refrigerator for long periods of time without going bad, it's been sterilized and dipped in some kind of wax in order for it to do that.
Oh, that's frustrating. I'm glad to know that. Something I didn't know before about organic foods having a kind of sterilizing wash. That's so unfortunate and very frustrating. Do you ship?
We do ship. I don't know about like fresh produce, but certain things for sure, like sweet potatoes and squash, and I'm sure like anything I wouldn't want to ship like arugula or whatever, because I'm not sure how that would go. But and meat, we have beef, pork, lamb, and goat, as well as ghee and other products.
I might have to look a little bit into that. I love all of your comments so far about the way that I think regenerative farming looks, and the way that maybe we should reconsider not only what we're putting in our bodies, but the way that we're getting what we put in our bodies. We can't assume that an apple today has the same nutritional value that it did 50, much less 100 years ago. It's so different. And I see a lot of people talk about like, well, I, grew up on this and I was okay. And I'm like, well, each decade it's getting exponentially worse, and the foods are getting exponentially more processed and less nutrient dense. And even, apples or strawberries, these conventional ways of raising our food has made it to where it's fighting against us.
Yes. And we've traded our resilience for convenience. And my ongoing request of everyone, every time I'm anywhere, is we must give up a little bit of our convenience so we can be more resilient. And it's worth it. It's worth it for your children to be able to reproduce. If we eat of a sterile system, we will become sterile. That is a fact, and we can see it happening. And so we have to trade that convenience for resilience. We need, of course, more people doing what I'm doing. We need more farmers, but everybody's not going to be able to do that. But we need people to support people that are doing what I'm doing, because this is for all of us. This is not for me. It's not the easiest way to restaurants and farming are not the easiest way to make money. I'm sure that I could trade Bitcoin and be much more successful, or cryptocurrency, or day trade, or many other things I could do with my time that would take much less effort and have much more return. But this really is about returning to a way of life where we can be resilient and we can be healthy, and we can be asleep at the wheel and just let it keep going the way it's going, but it's not going to be a positive outcome for humanity. So my request of everyone that might hear this is, please shift a little bit of your convenience for more resilience. And if that means driving to the farm to get raw milk, or buying a quarter of a cow with your neighbor and splitting it up and getting it from someone please support local farmers. We don't want to have 4 companies, as it is right now, processing 84% of the meat in America. That is a health issue. That is a national security issue. There is so many problems with that. We want local people producing food for local people. That is resilience. And we talk about local energy and local manufacturing, but we need local food. We don't need to grow millions of pounds of corn and soy and export it everywhere around the world. We need to grow food here for Americans and have a diversity of what we're growing in a plethora of healthy ways so people can make choices that align with their family values.
I couldn't agree more. When you buy locally, you support a small business, a ranch, or a regenerative farm, or whatever that may be. You are buying that family's children a new bike at Christmas. That's what you're buying with your money. You're not buying a millionaire another Ferrari, and so I think you do vote with your dollars, and it matters. It matters in a really big way. If you want to feel good about what you're supporting, I would say, look into it and realize that most of the people that are small, that are like you, that are out there creating this industry or trying to provide something that isn't widely used or respected, they're doing it because they feel like it's the right thing to do and for no other reason. And that matters too. I think food with integrity is important. Like, it's time that we stop being fed lies. Yeah, I'm
100%. It's time, and your children are worth it. Like that, your children are worth something better, even if it's a little bit inconvenient. That is the truth.
Yeah,
they deserve it.
I think
my children deserve it.
Yeah, I think, what was it? I had a carnivore JT on the podcast, and he pulled a quote out from someone, and it said that convenience is the opposite of good. I don't think I quite got his quote right, but that's kind of what stuck in my mind. And he's so right, because a lot of times the more convenient it gets, the less good it is for you, right? I mean, the fastest food you can get is 100. The worst food on the planet.
And think about it, it's small towns, small rural towns can't exist if you just have farms that are one tractor and hundreds of acres and one guy on one tractor, because then how does the barber survive? And how does the grocery store survive? And how does the feed store survive? Because there's nobody there. My farm has 22 people living on the farm. And so when you come here and buy your meat or your milk, then how many men? There's probably 10 men that live on the farm that all go get haircuts at the barber, and that supports the barber. And we go to the feed store, we go buy T-posts at the tractor supply. Like the little, everything supports that small town not turning into a ghost town. And to be honest, we lost both. Yeah, we lost both of our tractor dealers, John Deere and Mahindra, in this last year in my small town, which indicates to me that we're losing the farming in this area. If the tractor dealer cannot make money fixing tractors and selling tractors, then we're losing the farming in this area. And so it's important to have a resilient farm, but that resilient farm creates resilient community around it. And when you have a monocrop where you're growing one product and it's one man on one tractor, that doesn't support the rural communities to be resilient either. So it's not just about the farmer, but it's about the community that the farmer's in and how it's all interconnected. And look at someone like Will Harris, who took a town that was completely abandoned and made it into this thriving place, because now he has 140 employees that are living there, and he's got this store, brick and mortar store, and people are coming, and tourism, and people are coming to lunch on the farm, and all of it is all interconnected. And that's creating not just resilient food for you when you buy from White Oak Pastures, but it's creating a real resilient community in a real place in the world. And so all of that matters. And every time we spend our money, it matters. And there's a ripple effect. every time you spend your money, there's a ripple effect, and you get to decide our future every day.
So let me ask you this. Did you grow up on a farm or ranch, anything like that? Or are you a first generation farmer rancher?
So I grew up on a small farm in upstate New York. It was 27 acres, apples, and then my uncle raised steers, dairy steers, for a neighbor. And so we had a little bit of a farming background. But what's interesting is my father is farming now, my mother is farming, and I'm farming. So, but mostly my mom was a fashion designer, and we transformed our barn and everything into the factory. And so most of my childhood was not in the agricultural space, but in the garment industry. But now my mother is a farmer, my father is a farmer, I'm a farmer, my brother is a farmer. So we all came to this at different times in our life and through different pathways, but this is where we were all led, was to the land and to the soil.
What is the name of your ranch?
Sovereignty Ranch. And we're in Bandera, Texas.
And you have a restaurant at that ranch as well?
It's called The Barn. The Barn.
Cool.
Yes. Right now it's only open on Saturdays and Sundays. We'd like to expand the hours, but at this point the sales are not. But when we have the raw dairy up and running and people are coming every day to pick up milk and stuff like that, we're thinking that that's when we could have the restaurant open every day, at least, lunch and dinner or something, or breakfast and lunch. I don't know, whichever we think.
Why do you think that the restaurants are struggling? And this goes for the ones in LA as well that are serving nutrient dense, quality, healthy food.
I think why the restaurants are struggling in Los Angeles is government has the power to pull strings and never be responsible for the outcome of those strings. And so during the pandemic, they told everybody to stay inside for 3 years. They told everybody it was dangerous to eat out, and they changed the behavior, the habits of people in Los Angeles is the one thing. Minimum wage got raised to $18 an hour for servers and $20 an hour for everybody else, because when you make fast food $20 an hour, that makes everybody that's in the food industry, that besides servers that are getting tips, to be $20 an hour. But then it's got to be more than $20 an hour, because if someone at McDonald's is making $20 an hour, then somebody at Sage needs to make $25 an hour. And don't get me wrong, I want every one of my employees to have an abundant and resilient life. I'm not saying that. But if you just raise minimum wage by double in a few years and think that's going to change people's lives, it doesn't. It makes everything harder, because now everything is trying to catch up with that. And so not just my cooks' wages were, the person who was growing the food's wages went up. The person who was trucking it, packing it, shipping it, all of their wages went up. And that cumulatively across the board comes into the restaurant. And to-go boxes, for example, went in 3 years from $36 to $104 for the same amount of to-go boxes. That's a crazy raise, because you move one lever. And so the ecosystem in California doesn't work anymore. Nobody can afford to live in the neighborhoods where my restaurants are and work at the restaurants. People can't afford to go out to eat as much, no matter what their jobs are. It doesn't fit together. Rent is so high, gas is so high, and wages went up, but that made the cost of everything going up, so it didn't have anybody feel more abundant in their lives. And so I think that government interference is the primary reason that my restaurants are struggling in California. And of course, the vegans are really angry, and they're running a campaign against me, and they have been for 6 months, but that eventually will go away, I think. But the ultimate thing is the cost of everything has gone up exponentially. And for me to cover those costs, I would have to raise the prices on everything on the menu $5. And I already have customers struggling to be able to afford it at the price that it is. So I'm caught between a rock and a hard place, unable to find a pathway out.
So there's a couple things that I want to unpack with you here. One, I want to talk about the vegan mob. I want to talk about that. But I think before I move on to that, I want to talk about the pandemic and exactly what happened there. You've kind of glossed over it, and I know that we talked about it in the call, but I really want the listeners to understand how government intervening was so harmful to small business. And I want them to understand why you're so upset and why you moved to Texas, and what you were actually robbed of in that time.
It's hard for me to talk about this without getting emotional, but I will do my best. So I worked really hard. I'm one of those people who, just puts my everything into something when I'm doing it. And I built these brands up. I built these restaurants from nothing, from this tiny little hole in the wall to stores selling $7 million a year. And I built it up and bigger and bigger, and with the idea that I would sell it and I would get to have a life that was less hard in the future. And I didn't go to birthday parties and I didn't go to weddings, and I missed so much time with my children. And I got there. I got that $25 million offer for my restaurants, and we're in the due diligence phase, and we're going through, and I have to meet these specific markers. And in 2020, I meet those markers. I mean, the first quarter of 2020 was the best quarter we ever had. So I was on track to actually get more, up to 31 million if I could meet these markers. And the government, without any evidence, just closed us down for 2.5 years. No indoor dining for 2.5 years. And so I was robbed of all that energy that I put into that business. All of those years, 10 years of building, I was robbed of that. And I just had to close restaurants because I cannot afford to pay payroll taxes and workers' comp and through the pandemic. And we didn't have any better outcomes. It's not like you look at California and like, oh my goodness, California saved all these lives and Texas killed everybody. That's not what happened. They just robbed the independent wealth makers of their wealth and gave it to the oligarchy that got to stay open and got to do whatever they wanted to do. And so what was the purpose? Like, everybody was just in lockstep to rob the middle class and give everything to the billionaire class. And it felt personal. It felt like there was no evidence. And for anybody to even say that, for me to say like, can someone explain to me why we now no longer outdoor dining? They closed down outdoor dining multiple times. Can someone show me the evidence where outdoor dining is making people sick? Can someone show me anything? You're a science denier. You're this. My own employees were calling OSHA and calling the health department on pregnant me, breastfeeding me, saying I wasn't vaccinated and I was putting their life at risk. We were asked in California to do something, see something, say something, tell on your neighbors if they're gathering more than 10 people, whatever. Like, it was craziness, and it destroyed businesses. I lost 3 restaurants so far. I'm struggling to keep my last 2 open. My father lost multiple restaurants. 30% of restaurants in California closed. 30%. That is so many people's lives robbed from them. Thousands of hours of man hours just robbed from them because of a lie. And why did they have the power to do that? That I moved here to Texas because I didn't ever want a business that the government could just tell me no more. And just wipe with the stroke of a pen, they could wipe away everything I worked for.
Yeah, no, it's really, my heart goes out to you in the struggle and all of that. And I hope that where you are now, where you've pivoted to, that you can find a silver lining. And I really hope that this podcast will open up some people's eyes, minds, hearts, and wallets to support the bigger picture here and the smaller people that are trying, like the rest of us, to make this world better, right? It matters. It's really important. Let's talk about the vegan community. And I don't want to say everybody was partaking in this who's a vegan. I don't think vegans are necessarily bad.
No, for sure there was people
supporting.
There's vegans that supported me in this choice and understood and said, there's vegans that said we need better options. Like, I want there to be better options for the animals, and people aren't going to stop eating meat. So thank you for giving an option where there's less harm. So there was definitely people who saw the value in what I was doing, but it was not the majority.
let's talk about what happened when you announced that you were going to transition the business from being only vegan to being regenerative. And that didn't mean that you wouldn't offer vegan things still. I still went into the restaurant and I still saw some vegan, dishes available, which is nice because then you could eat with everybody at the same place and enjoy good, wholesome, regenerative food. But what happened when you made that announcement, and how did some of the vegans respond?
I mean, it was crazy. I never experienced anything like that, where some of the posts got, 500,000 views and just thousands, 10,000 comments, 18,000 comments, and mostly just a viscerally angry, calling me a murderer, calling me wishing for my children to die, wishing for me to die, wishing for me to die a slow, terrible death. And honestly, it's sad because when you think about it, let's say they get me closed. I mean, they went on Yelp and Google and had it and made it say permanently closed, kept getting it to say permanently closed so nobody would come to the restaurant, got all my Yelp removed. They made Yelp remove my all 4,000 positive reviews to say that was a different restaurant, and then that restaurant is dead and no longer exists. And, they did all these things. And so let's say if they succeed, let's say I close sometime and some venture capital firm puts in a rotisserie chicken spot or a burger spot. So then we're just back to supporting the consolidated feedlot system. We're back to supporting the system that we all are opposed to. By getting rid of me, you will only bring in something that is not as good as me. And so for their idea to be it's vegan or nothing, by trying to get me closed, and I mean, they are trying to get me closed. They said it themselves. We will get her closed, and it will be a success. By doing that, these activism groups that are doing that will only be creating a space for the next completely abusive situation to come in. The average Cisco truck restaurant that is not supporting American farmers, is not supporting local farmers, is not supporting regenerative agriculture, and surely will not have 70% vegan options.
Have you been able to talk to any of these people that have been out there? Some people threw blood on your restaurant. That's insane.
Yes.
Have you been able to
threw blood on my restaurant, made weird memes of like me breastfeeding my other employees, like gross stuff. And I stood out there. I tried to talk to people when they were protesting, and I tried to have people understand. And the thing is they just keep saying it was for the money, it was for the money, it was for the money. And I was trying to have them understand, it's what money, where? Like farming and restaurants on like an optimum situation might make 10, 12% a year. So just like wrap your head around like how much, if I sell $1 million, I get 10 to 12% of that a year. Like it's not, if I sell 10 million, like when we were selling $7 million, it's still not, I mean, split up amongst investors, blah, blah, blah. It's not like tons and tons of money. This restaurant business is not huge money, and farming certainly isn't huge money. So this idea that I'm doing it for the money, my husband asks all the time, honey, why do we have to do everything the way you believe God wants us to do it? Can't we just, he just wants to open up.
That sounds like something my man would say. Because I'm such
like,
a passionate person.
He wants to have like a corner store.
Right.
He doesn't want to have this responsibility in everything we do. And so I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it because I think it's what's best. And that is foreign to most people. Most people don't understand living a life with that level of integrity where you're saying, no, I'm doing what I think is right. And I believe that is our duty to do.
Well, the problem is that people don't think that exists anymore. So they question anybody who has a genuine, authentic integrity. They can't almost believe or grasp that someone would just do the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. And I think it's unfortunate because we've also disconnected with our intuition. You should start to be able to distinguish the more mature you get and the older you get and the more experiences you've had with negative people and positive people, which people are genuine and which people are not. But I think people struggle with this still, and they can't see themselves in you because they would take the money. They would be like, well, the only reason that I would pivot and do this is if I could benefit, in a way that's monetary. And I say, well, like monetary, you don't get to take that to the grave with you. You don't get to take that. There is a higher purpose. And, as a God-fearing woman myself, I feel like there is, I'm very intentional about my integrity. It means something to me as a person. And I no longer let the external world control or dictate my internal world because, there's just a lot that we're battling against. And I know that we're kind of coming to a close here, but I did want to say that there are a lot of people who are fighting against you right now. And I understand that. But one thing that I'm really good at is fighting, or I'm pretty decent at. I've made a career out of it. And, I might not be able to get out there and physically knock some heads around because that wouldn't be legal, but I want you to know that I'm on your team and that I support you. And if there's anything that I can do to help get your messaging out there beyond the podcast, I'm there. And I hope that people listening to this will understand how important one act of kindness, one act of supporting a small business, how far it goes and how hard it is. And, please try to support people who are trying to do the right thing. And please support Mollie. Chef Mollie is on Instagram. That's where we would find your personal page. And do your restaurants have an individual page each, or is it all under the same banner?
So there's the Kind Sage, that's for the LA restaurants, and then Sovereignty Ranch is for the Texas up.
And you have a retreat coming up in April. Can you talk about that really quick? That's kind of neat.
The Confluence Retreat. It's with Alex Zek and a bunch of different speakers and DJs. And we're also doing we're going to do a Food is Medicine retreat. The tickets are not available for that yet, but we're going to put it up soon. That's the second weekend in April. And we have a bunch of retreats coming up. So sign up for our newsletter and find out. But we do all different events from 40 people up to 500 people on our ranch. And you get to come here, you get to eat the food of the land, you get to stand on the land where your food comes from and be nourished by that microbiology in the air and in the water and also in the food that you're eating. And so whatever the retreat is on, and we do retreats on all different kinds of stuff, there's that nourishing aspect of having that experience of being on the land where your food comes from. And we are in a spiritual battle. This is a battle of good versus evil, whether we know it or not. And it's not just when you go to church on Sunday, and it's not just, what we decide to let our kids watch on TV, but it's what we eat, it's what we breathe, it's what we put our attention on, it's what we let our scroll be in our Instagram feed. It's everywhere. And so I invite you to remember that the food is part of this battle for good and evil. And eating real, true food that is the way God put it on this earth for us is part of aligning ourselves with the good side of history.
It's powerful. I completely agree. And Mollie, thank you again for enlightening us, enlightening myself. I really learned some things that I didn't know, and I'm so excited and passionate to support you on your mission. And going to connect you with a few people. I know we mentioned Bryce Mitchell, so I got to connect you with him. He's awesome. First generation farmer, UFC fighter, and, very active in this community as well. So what a blessing to have this conversation. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much. Definitely. Let's keep in touch. I'm so honored that you reached out, and I feel really supported by your commitment to getting my story out there. Thank you so much. And when you decide to do a women's retreat, I hope you choose the ranch here as a place.
I think that's a no-brainer. That's awesome. For the listeners, I had.
And if you're ever coming to Texas for anything else, Austin or San Antonio, for sure, make a 1 or 2 night pit stop here.
Yeah, where is the ranch, by the way? Where exactly? Tell the listeners, just in case.
Between San Antonio and Austin. We're between Bandera and Kerrville. If you're familiar with Texas, if you're not familiar with Texas, we're between San Antonio and Austin. So you fly into San Antonio is closer, and we have vacation rentals. This is one of our vacation rentals, actually. If we were in my house, I have 4 little ones, so you would be not able to hear me at all. We have tiny houses. We have shipping containers. We have glamping tents. and all different kinds of experiences. We have a huge mineral pond that has 2,000 parts per million of magnesium, as she was talking about earlier.
People
There's
swim in
so
it?
many nutrients that we need.
Do people swim in that?
Yeah, swim. We have paddle boards. We have kayaks. We have a sauna. We're working on a small gym area. It's not finished yet, but it will be up there by the pond. And we also have a cold plunge. So you get to come and you can add different experiences to your stay, like milking a cow into your coffee in the morning, or paddleboarding and kayaking, or going on a farm tour with me, or collecting eggs and making an omelet. So there's so many different things you can add to your stay, additional add-ons to make the trip worth it. And we have all different economic levels, from like $100 a night to $300 a night, depending on how big your party is and all of that.
I love it. Don't tempt me with a good time. That sounds like a great time. So I'm going to start looking at some dates. I'm going to go home and tell my fiance that I'm on to my next passion pursuit of going and visiting your farm and seeing what magic we can make happen. So thanks, Mollie.
That's awesome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored by your interest in what I'm doing. And thank you. And I'm honored for your audience's time and listening to what we had to say about it.
Absolutely.